name is Ethan, and this happened in February of 2024. I was 27 years old and working as a medical supply driver based out of Casper, Wyoming. Most of my deliveries were made during the day, but every few weeks I'd get assigned overnight routes because hospitals and clinics still needed supplies before morning. I actually liked the night shifts. The roads were usually empty, there was less traffic, and I could finish an entire route without stopping every 30 minutes. The only downside was the weather. Wyoming winters don't care what your schedule looks like. That night, I had finished a delivery in Riverton a little after 11:30 p.m. My next stop wasn't until early the following morning, so I decided to drive halfway home and get a motel room once I reached the next town. It had been snowing on and off since sunset. Nothing too serious, just enough to make the highway look gray instead of black. The temperature was around 15 degrees, and every few miles I'd hit another stretch of drifting snow crossing the road. Around 12:45 a.m., my fuel gauge dropped below a quarter tank. Normally, I wouldn't have worried, but the next confirmed gas station on my GPS was nearly 60 miles away. About 10 minutes later, I saw an old illuminated sign on the side of the highway. Open 24 hours. It pointed toward a small service road. I turned off the highway. The road wasn't paved. It looked like it hadn't been plowed in hours. Fresh snow covered most of it, and I had to drive slowly to keep from sliding. After about half a mile, I saw the station. It looked like it had been built sometime in the 70s. There were only 2 pumps, a small convenience store, and one dim light hanging above the front door. No other cars, no tire tracks besides mine. That should have been enough to make me leave. Instead, I pulled up beside the nearest pump. The digital display worked. I filled my truck without any problem. That was the strange part. Everything outside looked operational, but when I walked toward the store, something felt off. The windows were covered from the inside with old newspaper. Not completely, just enough that you couldn't see much inside. The front door had an open sign hanging on it. I grabbed the handle. Locked. I tried again. Still locked. I knocked once. Nothing. I figured the clerk might have been in the restroom, so I waited. About 30 seconds later, I noticed movement behind one of the newspaper-covered windows. Someone walked past. Just a shadow. I knocked again. "Lose your keys?" I joked, mostly to myself. No answer. The shadow stopped moving. I couldn't see a face, only the outline of someone standing completely still, watching the door, watching me. I stood there for another minute before giving up. I'd already pumped my gas. Maybe they just didn't want customers inside during the night. It wasn't impossible. As I turned back toward my truck, I heard 3 slow knocks. From inside the store, not on the front door, on the window, 3 deliberate taps. I looked back. The shadow was gone. I waited. Nothing else happened. I climbed into my truck and locked the doors. For some reason, I checked the mirrors before pulling away. The front window looked empty. No clerk, no movement, no lights except the one above the entrance. I drove back toward the highway. The entire stop lasted maybe 10 minutes. I told myself the employee was probably just asleep in the back, or maybe they were closing. There had to be a reasonable explanation. About 20 miles later, my phone buzzed. No signal. That wasn't unusual. Cell service disappeared constantly out there. I turned on the radio instead, mostly static. Every now and then, another station would break through for a few seconds before fading away. The highway was completely empty. No headlights ahead, none behind. just snow blowing across the pavement. Around 1:30 a.m., I noticed headlights in my mirror. They were still a long way back. I didn't think much of it. Eventually, another vehicle had to come along. 5 minutes passed. The headlights never got any closer. They stayed the exact same distance behind me. Close enough to see, too far away to identify. Another 5 minutes. Same distance, same speed. I slowed down by almost 10 miles an hour. Whoever was behind me slowed too. I sped back up. So did they. That finally got my attention. I switched lanes briefly. The headlights stayed directly behind me. I looked for a license plate. Couldn't make one out. Snow kept blowing across the road between us. I picked up my CB radio and called out. "This is medical transport on Highway 20. Anybody reading?" Nothing, only static. Then, a voice, weak, broken. "Don't!" The transmission cut off. I tried again. "Who's there?" Static. A few seconds later, "Keep," then silence. I stared at the radio. Maybe interference. Maybe another truck miles away. I kept driving. The headlights were still behind me, exactly where they'd been for the last 15 minutes. At 1:48 a.m., I saw another sign. Rest area. 1 mile, I decided to pull in. If the driver behind me stopped too, I'd know something wasn't right. The rest area was small, just a parking lot, 2 picnic shelters buried in snow, and a brick restroom building. No other vehicles. I pulled into the lot. The headlights behind me slowed. Then, instead of passing, they turned in after me. I felt my stomach tighten. I parked near the restroom entrance. The other vehicle stopped about 50 yards away. Its headlights stayed on. I couldn't tell what kind of vehicle it was. The snow made everything blurry. The engine kept idling, but nobody got out. I sat there watching it for almost a minute. Neither of us moved. Then my phone vibrated. 1 bar of signal had appeared. A text message came through. It wasn't from anyone I knew. There was no phone number, just the words, "You should have kept driving." I checked it again, expecting to see a phone number. There wasn't one, just unknown sender. I looked up. The other vehicle was still sitting 50 yards away with its headlights pointed directly at my truck. The engine was running. Nobody got out. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe someone was waiting for a friend. Maybe the text was spam that had happened to arrive at the worst possible moment. Then the headlights went out. The parking lot became almost completely dark. My truck was now the only source of light. I immediately locked the doors again, even though they were already locked. I picked up my phone and tried calling 911. No signal. The single bar I'd had was gone. I started the engine. The second, my headlights swept across the other vehicle. It was empty, driver's door hanging open, no one inside. I couldn't understand it. I'd been looking at that SUV only a second earlier. There was no way someone could have walked away that fast without me seeing them. I threw the truck into reverse. Before I could move, something slammed against the passenger side window. Bang! I nearly jumped out of my seat. I turned my head. A man was standing inches from the glass. He wore a heavy winter coat, black gloves, and a dark knit cap pulled low over his face. I couldn't make out his features. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't trying to break the window. He just stood there with one gloved hand resting against the glass, looking directly at me. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was slow, almost like he knew I couldn't do anything. I hit the gas. The truck fishtailed on the snow before catching traction. The man didn't chase me. He simply watched as I sped toward the highway. When I looked in the mirror, he was still standing in the exact same place. I merged onto the highway and pushed my speed higher than I normally would have in those conditions. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. About 10 minutes later, I checked my mirrors again. Nothing. No headlights. No SUV. I finally started to calm down. Then my fuel warning came on. I frowned. That made no sense. I just filled the tank. I looked at the gauge. It showed barely over a quarter. I honestly thought something was wrong with the truck. When I reached the next town, I pulled into a modern gas station that was definitely open. I filled the tank again. It took almost 15 gallons. The gas I'd supposedly bought at the first station wasn't there. I asked the cashier if there had been a problem with their pumps lately. He looked confused. "What first station?" I described the old building with 2 pumps and the faded open 24-hour sign. His expression changed immediately. "I think you're talking about Miller's." "Yeah, that sounds right." He shook his head. "That place shut down almost 4 years ago." I laughed. "No, I was just there." He stared at me. "No, you weren't." He pointed toward the front window. "That station has plywood over every window. The pumps don't even work." I felt cold all over. "There was a guy inside." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached under the counter and pulled out a local newspaper. It was folded to a story from the previous winter. The headline read, "State Police Investigate Highway Robberies." According to the article, several late-night drivers had reported being lured off the highway by temporary illuminated signs advertising fuel. The signs disappeared before police arrived. Victims said someone waited for them at abandoned buildings before following them back onto the highway. Most escaped. One driver never did. His truck was found abandoned less than 10 miles from the same rest area where I'd stopped. No suspect had ever been identified. The cashier looked at me. "You should probably call the sheriff." I did. A deputy met me about 30 minutes later. He listened carefully while I explained everything. The gas station, the locked door, the shadow, the SUV, the man at my window, the strange text. When I finished, he asked one question. "Did you touch anything at that first station?" "I used the pump." "Anything else?" "I tried the front door." He nodded, but didn't explain why. The next morning, 2 deputies drove out with me to show them where it had happened. We followed the same highway, the same service road. Half a mile later, there was the building, except it looked nothing like it had the night before. The roof had partially collapsed. The windows were covered with old plywood. The pumps had been removed. Snow had drifted all the way against the front entrance. No fresh tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. One deputy tried opening the front door. It wouldn't budge. The hinges were rusted solid. He looked back at me. "This building hasn't been opened in years." I walked around the side. My truck tracks from the night before were gone beneath fresh snow. But something else caught my eye. Near the back wall, I found a line of boot prints, fresh, leading away from the building. They disappeared into the open prairie instead of toward the road. The deputies followed them for almost 200 yards. Then, they simply ended. No return tracks, no vehicle tracks, nothing. One deputy muttered, "That's odd." Neither of them found another clue. I never heard anything else from the sheriff's office. A month later, I transferred to daytime routes. I still drive that highway a few times every year. Every single time, I glance toward that old service road. The sign is gone now. The station still sits there, buried in snow and falling apart. Sometimes I convince myself I imagined most of that night. Then I remember the text message. I kept screenshots of it for weeks before my phone died, and I lost everything. The phone company couldn't find any record that the message had ever been sent. Maybe it was some kind of prank. Maybe I interrupted a group using that abandoned station to target lonely travelers. I honestly don't know. What I do know is this. If you're driving through the middle of nowhere after midnight and you see an old gas station that looks like it shouldn't still be operating, keep driving. Because whatever is waiting inside probably isn't there to sell you gas.